Are you an entrepreneur or ready to become a boss? Welcome to Hawaii Boss, the business podcast made in Hawaii, where you will hear from island movers and shakers on who they are and their impact on our state. And now, step into the office of your host for Hawaii Boss, David Pettijohn.
Aloha, Hawaii Boss podcast crew listening in out there or watching in out there. You're lucky if you're watching in because we're heading over to Alice Kim's office with Hanalei Company. Today, Alice, we're going to learn a little bit more about your company and are excited to learn more about you on Hawaii Boss. So today we welcome you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd love to answer any questions or talk about my story if that interests or helps anyone.
Oh yeah, we got lots of, we're going to hear all about it. We're excited because, you know, women develop co-owner with partner that you have from New York. You met. So that's the thing is, we always are curious how you get to Hawaii. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right, the voyage.
A little bit about, why Hawaii? Yeah. Or why and how? Because everyone's trying to figure that out.
Exactly. So just to give you a little bit of background. So I went to my undergrad, I went to Rhode Island School of Design. So I was a jewelry designer. I did metals, something completely different. And then I went to Parsons in New York for fashion merchandising. And then I worked as a retail buyer for many years. That was my corporate career for 10 plus years in New York.
So low stress, real easy kind of work.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Like you kind of breeze by that like it was nothing, but it sounds like there were a lot of 80-hour weeks. I mean, tell us a little bit. People don't know what work is, I think, over here in Hawaii. Maybe they don't as much as maybe someone who can appreciate it, who's lived and worked in the sort of corporate business world in New York City. We're all curious. Right.
Yes. So I loved it. You know, I was much younger then too. I was in my 20s. I had the energy. You know, it was great. It was kind of the two worlds combined. I'm a very creative person. I have creative background, but I just didn't see myself, you know, kind of retiring as a designer. I wanted more. I wanted, you know, to know how it's made and also how to sell it and how is it produced and how do you, many questions.
How do I get in on this gig?
Exactly. Right. And so a lot of so the Parsons part, the graduate part of my education, you know, in New York City, that network, they really helped bring together those two worlds together, the business and the creative side. Mm-hmm. You asked about my partner, who is also my husband, but at the time was not my husband.
Right.
But he's local. So I always say that, you know, most local people, they're like the salmon. They got to come back upstream.
At one time, yeah, they always say it like, you know what, it's time to go home. And
it's time to go home.
And they just know, yeah.
Exactly. It's a really difficult journey. It's far from everywhere, but, you know, and I totally understand that the spirit of aloha and just, you know, after living here for 12 years, which is how long we started the business, you know, there is really no place like home and why everyone gravitates back, even though it's a very difficult journey to do. And it's a big life decision. So my husband and business partner, he was working in Wall Street. And I always like to say, if anyone wants to go in business with their significant other, husband, partner, whatnot, make sure you do different things.
Good. Okay.
Right. So I'm very, you know, creative. I do marketing. I do product development. Most of my time is spent in product development. He's obviously finance. So he does a lot of the finance, the legalese, the operations, the logistics. So we kind of split, and then our team is split that way as well. So I think it helps.
Well, that makes sense for, you know, sometimes creative partnerships and marriages don't always work out. So sometimes, you know, there's a delicate sort of, everyone's got to walk a fine balance there, but it sounds like you say, you took advantage of having the different skill set, as it were, for your business partner and long-term partner.
Correct. So I think, you know, finding a business partner, that's probably like a whole other podcast. But, you know, for us, we were doing our corporate jobs in New York. Both of us went to graduate school out there. And then 2008 hit, and that was the big recession in New York. And I mean, all over America. But we just, being at the worst place where the epicenter of where everything was happening and the really economic collapse was happening then.
The Great Recession, I think they coined it.
Exactly. You know, we were both very entrepreneurial, pay our dues, doing these corporate, you know, gain some experience. And really after the recession, it aligned our entrepreneurial stars together. And we said, okay, let's just try, let's jump ship, you know, and let's get out of it and try it together. And both of us had no beauty, no cosmetics background. Like I said, I was in fashion. So I did a lot of apparel. I did clothing. I worked for brands I did mass retail like Calvin Klein, Aeropostale. I did a lot of teen retail. I was the retail buyer for, everything from swimsuits to socks to, things that you see in mass market.
You knew how things got to market. You knew how that sausage was made.
Correct. Right. And I was very familiar in manufacturer and making these goods and scale. It really excited me. Vera, like I mentioned, he was on Wall Street. He was at a very big bank. And then, we just said, let's just try it. So the two of us looked at the markets, and the bank and fashion, those are two things that do really well when the economy was good, and nobody's buying those things in a down economy. So we looked at kind of recession-proof industries where we had no business in. Beauty was one of those things that was very trending. This is 2010, David. So there was no Instagram, there was no social media like it is today.
Right, you're still sending out mailers, no? Maybe not that, fill in the envelopes and sending them out.
Right. Not that old, but yeah, it was like, there was not really the shopping experience, the digital platforms, what we call D2C today, which is direct to consumer, that really didn't exist back then. Right. And Korean beauty, what we call K-beauty, even myself being Korean American, that was not a category back then as well. So the reason we went into beauty is we're like, listen, even though there's a recession, women are still going to buy cleansers, creams, make themselves, a lipstick is not, hundreds of dollars like an article of clothing or a handbag would be. It's an accessible luxury that is not going to go away. And we really kind of hedged our bets. And there's so many ways to start a business. We did it the very, very, very old-fashioned way. So we used.
Was this before or after you hadn't moved to Hawaii yet?
We hadn't moved to Hawaii yet, and I'll get to why the companies are named the way it is. So and everyone's like, and then they look at me, and I'm Asian, and they're like, who is this person? Who is Elizabeth Mott? Well, and I'm actually going to give a talk about this to a lot of, I do a lot of speaking for female entrepreneurs, but be very careful what you call your companies, even though you're like, oh, let me just name it this and change it later. Once you start selling product, you may not be able to change it.
It's difficult. So, exactly. Because you have to change all of the whole in the product redesign and everything. It's too much investment already.
Exactly. So Elizabeth Mott, we decided, was our holding company while we decided to figure out what we wanted to do in the beauty industry. Elizabeth Street and Mott Street are two streets in Soho where our apartment was. Okay. It was like in Hawaii, it'd be calling it like Kapiolani Beretania or something. It's the equivalent of that in New York. So anyone who lived in the lower part of New York's like, I know where that is. Elizabeth Street and Mott Street. And then we started selling cosmetics, and I couldn't change the name, so it just kind of stuck. And all Elizabeth Mott is, and at that time when we first started in 2010, we really kind of saw the trend, and we're like, okay, I think these cosmetics from Korea that are very innovative, very like superior technology, affordable, not that expensive. I think it's kind of, it's a gap in the marketplace. We don't see that.
Sure.
So I didn't just import them over, because a lot of times we have these amazing, Korean beauty brands that come over, like the Face Shop, Nature Republic, Tony Moly. But the problem with that for me was it was not really Americanized. There's American women, they have different needs in terms of cosmetics. Right. So what we did was we call it Korean inspired cosmetics. So I take the technology and I utilize and I formulate it in a way that is applicable to the American female and the American market.
Sure. So different things that sell well here was compared to other things that might not sell the same in Korea.
Correct.
Or sell better,
or different makeup usages. Like for example, here, people want very matte skin. They want their makeup to stay on all day. They want, there's different needs, a lot heavier, actual foundations and cosmetic products than there is in Korea. So I just kind of formulated things that I felt like, didn't exist here with the kind of superior technology that Korea has in the cosmetic market. Yeah. So we're quite known for like face primers and eye makeup and brow makeup and mascaras and things like that. And that's where we really started. And we, and then, so we're doing Elizabeth Mott on Elizabeth Mott in New York. This is probably like 2009. And then we pulled in all of our savings, 401k. So it's funny because my husband and partner Vera, Iolani grad, like he's, very local. So he went to business school. I'm like, don't they say this is the thing you shouldn't do in business school? Like take out your
right.
IRA.
Shoot it all into one.
Exactly.
One
exactly.
basket
I was like, what? I don't have a finance degree. Exactly.
Like Vegas or something.
So we were doing that, and then our burn rate which means like the money that you're spending every month. It's New York City, so it was just we're like we're making zero income right now. We gotta go back home, and I'm from LA originally. Vera's from Hawaii, so we're like I think my in-laws are quite cool. So I'm like, you have cooler parents, so I let's be right.
Sometimes you flip a coin. Sometimes you're like, who can I tolerate? If we're gonna stay at their place. Right.
That really was it. And we're like, we're in it let's give it a year. In Hawaii, like you mentioned earlier, David, it is probably, I've done business in a lot of different places. It is one of the most difficult landscapes. I mean, it's much better today because of, I think the social media and the digital platforms.
Right. You can kind of go around the normal sources, that you're having to drive eyes and things.
Correct. And I can kind of talk about how we do things logistically and that's warehousing and stuff like that. But, we said, okay, we're going to go to this island and start a business with all of the money that we've saved up from working all this time in our professional careers. And we really said, let's give ourselves 2 years. That's the run rate, and we saved up on money, and I think entrepreneuring is really not for the faint of heart, right? Like,
oh no,
if you like patience and you like to get paid and you like healthcare, don't leave your day job. I mean, we had none of those things for quite a long time. And even when you're growing and you're cash flow positive and all these things, it never ends really, right?
Yeah, you can siphon that off pretty. If you think you're getting a vacation to Cairo here anytime soon, that's not happening. There's no gallivanting around the world yet. You got to put some stability in place.
Exactly. So it's just, but we love it. I mean, I'm very passionate. Both of us are very passionate about making products. We're very back of the house. So we like development, creation, design, all these things that go into like putting a product, whether it's on shelf or Amazon or any of these places. That's really our pride and joy. And it's different for every entrepreneur. I have a lot of entrepreneur friends that, they like to be front of the house. They like to talk about, like, for me, I love to talk about Hawaii and the journey and us as, a unit to create products. But, I'm kind of a little bit like, I don't really want to talk about myself too much. Right. A little bit more of a private person. But, I think it's really interesting why people go into business. There's very different motivations.
Well, and there's so many different pathways too. You don't even really know. Different businesses have certain, domains and suddenly you find yourself in all of the domains. I think as an entrepreneur, you have to fill HR if you're trying to hire anybody, then, and also the complicated communication with, fortunate that you have someone who can speak Korean and communicate the complexities of your needs, to the, that Korean producers there. So that's not there's a few talents that you bring also, I think, that probably, go unnoticed, but, putting those networks together is no easy thing for, creating a supply chain and then making it, available at all times. During the pandemic, how did you guys fare? Would you guys get knocked around a little bit?
So we're completely what they call digitally native or D2C, direct to consumer. So that means and I do some business, like I mentioned earlier, with DFS, which is the duty-free stores. We do
are they opening those back up yet? They're not yet quite.
They are in certain areas, but the Kalakaua one, sadly, in the heart of Waikiki, that one is closed, which was that huge,
it doesn't have the best sort of a hangout team out in front either right now. So hopefully they get that up and going.
Right. But because we're, and we do, things with Four Seasons and a lot of the hotels in Hawaii, we love our wholesale partners in Hawaii. They really have been so supportive. And even during the pandemic, there's nobody coming here, but still they would work out something to order and keep the business alive. So I really appreciate that. And there really is that aloha spirit during good times, hard times. And, this is our home. And I think there is something connective, bigger than the business, bigger than the product, and just in terms of like human connection that I've really experienced living here versus anywhere else in the world.
Well, Well, it seems like you've also sort of put that back, and we always say businesses on Hawaii Boss, in order to do business with Aloha, there's a give back. There's always that give back. You can't take, and then bring it home, put it in your bank somewhere over there. You got to be engaged, or else you're going to miss things. Tell us about how your company, well, first the products that some of the beauty products, we'll talk about those in a little bit, but tell us that, that piece about the give back and how that's impacting the way you do business online.
Yeah, of course. So, as I mentioned earlier, finance and like kind of legal, myself is on the creative side. So Vera gives back to that's a very important part. I think, I meet so many, we both do a fair amount of mentoring for different areas. Vera works with a foundation called Akamai, which is placing, this is very interesting. I didn't know about it until we moved back to Hawaii. We're both passionate about the things in terms of getting the next generation to kind of maybe not emulate the things that we do, but giving them an opportunity or any kind of knowledge that we can shed about our experiences.
And somehow being able to thrive on the islands rather than having to go and leave in order to afford to come back, right?
Correct. So Vera helps volunteers and a lot of our time and some resources to Akamai, which is helping, Hawaii high schools, mainly high school students, get to like a Wall Street type of position. Like, and that's, and if you think about it, even physically, Hawaii to Wall Street is 6,000 miles, something like that, right? It's physically very difficult. A lot of times they don't have the, training resources, capability, opportunities that you do in the mainland. So I think that's a really important give back initiative. So that, that's somewhere that he spent most of his career. So, he can actually help implement and inspire and train, the next generation to do that as well.
Yeah. And Hawaii is 6 hours closer to the Asia market. So I don't know what the problem, I mean, so anyway, we're well positioned for things like that, but also for the beauty products and the things that you give. It looks like when you purchase things, you can also give back or donate in some way to the different charities online.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we do the Akamai, we do work with UH quite a bit. We work with like beauty. We have a lot of nonprofits that we work with in the beauty industry for either alopecia or anyone that reaches out to us for a pretty good cause, we usually donate. So if there's anyone out there that's a nonprofit that's like, if we have overstock in terms of products, we donate a lot of times. So we work with a lot of, organizations that either need resources, products, anything that we can help with.
Right. And I mean, that's a great way to give back. I saw in there how much in product you donated online and also in kind and cash and different things. So I also see on there's a little rabbit there on the thing. Tell us about that and why that's meaningful for you and your company.
So I think that, this is a big trend, not just in beauty, but I think globally, right? Wellness, just putting better stuff on your face, on ingesting, even for like supplements and stuff. So, it was important for us to be a part of that initiative. So all the manufacturers that we work with, they don't do any animal testing. They do, and that's an actual thing that was, quite common back in the day. You have a new cream or whatever, and they would test it on
rabbits and monkeys. Is that why, is that why it's a rabbit
sometimes
there? What's
subjects.
that called?
That's the cruelty.
Yeah, what's the name?
Called
Cruelty free. Okay.
Yes, correct. Cruelty-free program. So we do those. Many of our products we're reformulating to be vegan. That's a big trend right now. Sure. I mean, just think about the food world. A lot of those overlap in beauty, wellness. I would say like vitamins, supplements, health, all of those areas. So we try to be as up to date and, giving the best types of products out there that are relevant for the society today, and what people need today. Sure.
And now how do you get feedback? It sounds like you have a pretty good loop of people giving you feedback. It's real easy to get on your website, HanaleiCompany.com. Easy to get in. You can sign up right away. It asks you to sign up for the preferred customer thing, and it shows all the products that are available. And probably as you sign up, you might get updates and things. How does that work if you sign up as there's a Influence Ohana program or different? Tell us a little bit about different programs you can get involved. in there?
Yeah, so that's a newsletter where you're, being digital, that is your store actually, right? That is your voice customers, the email subscriptions. Sometimes they come by text on your phone. It really depends on like what you want to opt in or opt out of. So we have different varieties of ways you can receive your information, right? Like you can get a weekly newsletter, what's going on in Hanalei and what are new product launches like. So we kind of drill it down to what it is that you're interested in, and cater the best technology announcement based off of what you need or what you want.
Sure. So you can put in some factors and they can, maybe there's some consulting that goes on, or just says this might be might apply to you, because it's all full of Hawaiian-based products. Yeah, Hawaii-based.
Yes, we use either Hawaiian inspired or actual Hawaiian ingredients like a kukui oil or Maui sugar. It depends on, as you know, in Hawaii, we're not like as mass farming as they in California, right? The real estate is. So it does depend on what is accessible during that time. And right now you mentioned supply chain. That is a huge hurdle, I think, not just for cosmetics and beauty, but probably every single industry that makes something, any kind of CPG company. It is very, very, very tough to get raw ingredients. Fuel costs are up. It is a much more challenging landscape to get products in on time and made on time, just because there's COVID. And
there's on all that throughput, there's a little extra charge on each one of those little markers now with this surcharge or that surcharge probably. And, the cost of this has gone up. Sorry about that, folks. And
correct.
Yeah.
I mean, just so much going on at the same time. Right. It's not just one thing. So yeah, I think that, but that's also business. I feel like, you were talking about, the Great Recession, like there's always something going on. Right. So I think for every entrepreneur, like being very scrappy, being very, resilient, and just finding different ways to problem solve is your job ultimately. Being able to, all right, like, I think there's always every decade, every 5, 6, 10 years, there's some sort of economic or downturn, something that is going on, and I think it is our responsibility to keep the product or you pivot, right? You find a different to bring goods in or make different goods. I've had to pivot many times. You were asking during the pandemic, or I'm assuming you're mentioning like specifically during lockdown. How was it for you? And it was not bad, David, because I also have a very amazing team. I have 12 employees in Honolulu. I have 2 in Korea. We have a lot of contractors throughout the United States. I have some, virtual employees, Philippines, kind of all over. I have about 30 total. So, from the 2 of us doing everything together, now we have, this team of, and it makes me quite proud. We were doing the whole remote thing before a pandemic even started. So a lot of that was because of where we live in Hawaii. Certain positions just didn't exist here, and it was, the beauty industry kind of doesn't exist at all in Hawaii. So I had to get very, very, very creative in finding somebody who was familiar with product development or this or that, or supply chain, logistics, design, for cosmetics. So
you can get some papaya flavored soap or something like that over at the market or something on the weekends. There's these little small groups trying to put something together, but they don't have this space where to get it to.
Correct.
For someone,
Yeah, and we've always been mass retail. So, we do, like I mentioned, like the DFS or like the hotels and the Hawaiian Airlines. Those are a big part of our like local Hawaiian initiatives. But I would say a majority of our how we started, it's all online. We sell a big portion on Amazon, and we also do a lot, on our own websites. So, we've been doing this for 12 years now. Hanalei is about 6 years old, and the original one that I mentioned was Elizabeth Mott, which is bringing these Korean cosmetics. And if you look on the website today, I mean, there's all kinds. We even have a full skincare line that I developed in my bedroom during COVID, because and it was amazing because everyone was working so hard during that time, and in Asia the supply chain was not an issue like it is today. So we were able to make the goods, develop it. I mean, we would have Zoom calls just like this, and both of us would smell it. Very creative ways to.
Well, Yeah, and that's what I guess it forced everybody to really, if they wanted to move through this.
Yeah.
But there's a whole group of folks that maybe were left behind. I'm a little worried about that didn't quite catch that, and I think that's the competitive advantage now. Folks who are able to do this distantly oriented and remotely oriented.
Right. So we developed an entire line of skincare for both Hanalei and Elizabeth Mott during those 12 months. And it was not easy, but it was also very gratifying to be able to be that productive while at home. And I mean, any founder that makes, more than I would say 2 products, right? You need a really good, base of people that can do the things for you. There's just no way you can do this all yourself.
Right. But it takes people with a Hawaii orientation to be able to sort of harness all those and bring them all into one spot, because no one ever thinks about, they're in the Philippines and they want to develop a business over here. Someone here on the ground has to be that network connector, that hub, as it were.
Correct. And I mean, I'm a little bit unusual for Hawaii business because we, like I said, most of our distribution is online. So our inventory, a lot of it doesn't hit Hawaii. So it'll go straight from Korea to LA and goes into the warehouses there,
Because of scale. I mean, they don't have that resource availability to repackage that here in Hawaii and then spend extra for shipping and flying that over. It's impossible.
And then so we do bring a small portion here, which we supply to the retailers, like I mentioned. And so it's really funny because during this podcast, I was like, oh, do you want to do it at your office? I'm like, my office is just an office. A lot of people think I have like a store. And I'm like, no, there's nothing there if you come. There's maybe like, a half a dozen lotions and some products like, 95.
I've got lunch in the microwave back there.
It's not sexy at all. It's not glamorous. And it's really an office with cubicles where, and now most of my team is still hybrid. So, it's really just kind of an empty office. So it's not as interesting. And I think that's another thing, the type of work environment that has happened after COVID. If you're making products, especially beauty products and stuff, it seems very difficult to do that from your home. But again, my team has been really amazing all over the world. And I think that, I would say that's the 2.0 of any kind of business, development and scale, right? You can't do all these things by yourself. You need to really invest in the people that will understand your vision, understand the language, and execute and help you execute.
Right. It does take a team. And, seeing yourself now, and we always like to find out a little bit about the person. You said you came up in LA. Did you, when you were going to school and grinding it out were your parents, Korean and immigrants from Korea? And how did that impact your, coming from that schooling method or that Korea does, and then having to live that way? I think in LA, probably, again, East Coast school, very important to go to an East Coast school probably too. But anyway, tell us a little bit about that, that journey for you as you're learning here and trying to be American too.
Sure. I mean, I was born here, so I'm Korean American. My parents were immigrants, and but my mother went to college in the mainland. So, they've been here for, like most immigrants, right? Especially Korean Americans. They came in a little bit later, but definitely in the 70s. And my dad, he's an entrepreneur also, and so I think it's the apple kind of doesn't fall far from the tree. I always saw him doing a version of this. So it was never like taboo or you have to only be a doctor or a lawyer. I'm like, well, sold. And my dad did leather jackets. That kind of dates, the Top Gun era, which is back in theaters now, which is kind of cool.
I know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he used to supply leather jackets and did that there was a big wholesale market to do that, department stores and stuff. So
straight out of Itaewon, right? All the
No. He would manufacture it and make it in the manufacturing was no. And then he would
in Korea. Okay.
And then spread it kind of, Nordstrom, Macy's, all these retailers. So the only difference is that was wholesale retail, right? And I do it direct to consumer, which you kind of bypass the retailer.
Right,
That's
right.
business and we sell it direct,
Yeah,
through
no
our
more middleman. The computer's the
Right.
middleman sort of.
Right. So the times have changed, but that was a huge, I would say that was a huge inspiration and a huge backbone to me doing what I'm doing today. And it was very easy for me to just say, like, that's what I want to do. I
Right.
saw it. And trust me, there was like not a lot of great parts to it too, right? Like it's just sleepless nights. And, he really, I think every entrepreneur, every business owner is just so much struggle, right?
Especially in
Struggle.
manufacturing. I mean, he's doing the same thing you were, but with less resources, on the phone and the yellow pages
Right.
and this
Faxing. Yeah,
right,
exactly.
trying to pull this off and just
Email,
amazing.
right.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just like a lot more business trips because you had to do things in person. So it was, but it's just, I think that heart and soul and the energy of creation, it was always supported, which is why I went to school for something creative, and that was never looked down on. So it made it that much easier for me to jump ship. They weren't, and I paid my dues, I worked
Right.
corporate enough. I had savings. And Vera, my husband, our parents are like not in the same entrepreneurial sense, but business owners. So I think immigrants, business owners, like that was never anything to be like ashamed of or looked down. It was very common in both of our families. So
Right.
I have to say that, that support is, it's priceless.
Yeah. And it's, and it sounds like you grew up maybe in the, maybe you went in as he was delivering, some of the leather and the jacket, maybe going to the factory with him, tagging along and seeing all the folks. And I mean, downtown, LA, where all that manufacturing area down there in the clothing manufacturing is super cool. And so, yeah, I mean, you got to up close, like how it works on the ground. So when you went to New York, you had this savvy already of like, hey, I know how that works. You can't give me that.
Yeah, I don't know if I still had to learn a lot. And I mean, I did learn a lot within, my clothing, but that is part of the reason I went into apparel. It was, I saw it kind of all my life. And I went into women's wear versus menswear, which my father was doing. But yeah, I mean, it excited me seeing how it's made, seeing like rolls and rolls of fabric, and you cut it up and there's a pattern and like that kind of stuff. Just, I mean, till this day, it still excites me. It doesn't matter if it's like a lotion and the skincare or like a roll of fabric to make a pair of jeans. Like it just
does that mean it's moving? That means your company's going and you're selling product and you're doing what you're supposed to do.
Exactly. And there's like a supply chain and there's a infrastructure and all these things in place. It's really kind of a happy, exciting place for me. So yeah, I think, by the time I started Elizabeth Mott, the first company, which, we still do today, but I was very familiar. I was very comfortable going into a factory and say, I want this, make sure this is this. And, those things did help. But I have to say that, I didn't know anything about cosmetics. So I had to do my fair share of research, understanding, how formulations are made. And a lot of this is science, right? It's like chemistry. It's, you cook things up kind of like, same thing in a beaker, and you have to test it and you have to make sure it's stable. So that kind of stuff I had no idea about. But I would say that, process is process, right? You have to do that. And then I have one of my employees in Korea. I mean, same thing. She was in the apparel industry, and then now she's, manages, we work with 70 plus manufacturers in Korea in cosmetics and skincare. And she does the same thing. It's like you're adapting, but it's from clothing to lotions. It's really not that different. You just got to learn the trade industry of it, but the process is always the same. You got to, make sure it stabilize this, and then you got to test it, quality, this, that, shipping, all that.
It's manufacturing it. Basically it doesn't matter what the product is necessarily. There may be some different inputs or throughputs or whatever like that, but it's generally the same, getting this to market from raw materials or whatever to get it to there. There's all these little components, the R&D, all this stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you don't learn that overnight. So, for all those out there, just keep working hard. And one day you might know as much as Alice does about all these things, Hawaii related and beauty care products related. And of course, check out her stuff on HanaleiCompany.com and then the full blast. You can go to, what was the name of the Mott?
Elizabeth Mott.
Elizabeth Mott. I apologize. Yeah, Elizabeth Mott's another company where you can get some different maybe some other products as well. But we're excited that you came. What's that?
It's Korean cosmetics, that one for the most part.
Korean cosmetics. Okay, bringing that in, that technology that we were talking about. But hey, this has been great. Before you leave, though, we want to find a little bit more about you. Tell us if you have any downtime, again, entrepreneurs, maybe you don't go on vacation, but is there a getaway? Is there a space in Hawaii that says, if I need to unwind, you don't have to tell us your secret spot, but
So that's important. I think, David, that's a really good question, because burnout is a real thing, right? And especially if you're a husband and wife team, there is no separation really, right?
Right.
You love that. I love it, but it does, I think it's really important to take moments for yourself and be able to.
You don't have an 11 o'clock PM cutoff, no business after 11 or.
No such thing. Emails at 4 a.m., whatever I have to do. But again, like having the good team, it just, you teach your employees, right? Like this is how it and then they do a part of the work, because there's just no way you can be at 20 places all at once,
Right.
after 12 years. But I would say that, moving to Hawaii, I think neighbor islands are just the best thing ever, right? It's just so beautiful, and they're so different from each other. So that's kind of my thing. Like I was in Hilo maybe a month ago. So I take off kind of a little bit, and it's easy, because you can be back in 40 minutes. And you can
catch a meeting. If you got to catch a meeting, oh, well, I'm in Hilo. Well, I can jump on the Teams meeting or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. So to your point, I think, it's the closest mainland is maybe LA, that's 5 hours. And I do a fair amount of business travel. I just got back from Vegas. To me, I'm from the mainland. So to me, that's not really vacation. It's
right.
It's just more work and urban, and it's
and not home.
Anyways, and there's a lot of jet lag. The older I get too, it's just it needs to be very accessible and easy and kind of short bursts, so that you can do work and then go away if you need to. But I think neighbor islands have so much to offer, and I feel like even though I go to the same places twice or 3 times, I always discover something different.
Right.
And there's a unique culture between each island, but there's still obviously this aloha that unifies every island together. And I think it's such a beautiful, and we're so lucky to call this home.
Absolutely. Yeah. It ceases to surprise you. Different places, you can travel around the corner. Well, I've never seen that. Or, I've lived on the Big Island for, 8 years and have difficult to see everything still. There's lots of places that haven't gone, and
totally.
But anyway, we're fortunate, I think, as the folks here at Hawaii Boss Podcast crew listening, and that we got a chance to speak to you, Alice. And before we go, anything you want to say about your business, your product, and all those folks? Words of wisdom.
I think we love to support local, and anyone who's interested in trying our products, yes, please reach out on the website, or there are people who are I'd love to stop by. I mean, like I mentioned, we're just a cubicle with a few people in the office, but we love that. We're in Kaimuki.
So you have some local stores here, some local stores that are carrying your product?
Yes. Like I mentioned, the Four Seasons, we have, and then if you go to the website, there's a list of where we're carried within the islands. But some people, if you're really interested, definitely make an appointment or email or whatnot. But, I've had people stop by, they're like, oh, I really want to know how it's made. And I think, starting a business is it's a leap of faith already, it's outside of the norm. It's not something normal. And if I could help, especially helping women is a big part of that too. Female entrepreneurs is a whole, I feel like there's more obstacles, to be honest. I'm always happy to help out, especially local. So yes, I've made myself available as a mentor, various ways, and I'd love to help where I can.
Awesome. Well, Alice Kim from Hanalei Company. And again, until we meet again, aloha.
Aloha. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to Hawaii Boss and follow us on social media at Hawaii Boss Podcast at the links in the description. We'll see you soon in the boss's office.